on CityCast Nashville, we're following up on a local controversy that raised our eyebrows last week. Historian Bridget Jones is the creator of the Belle Meade Historic Site and Winery's award-winning tour, Journey to Jubilee, which she specifically designed to give visitors a deeper understanding of the raw and uncomfortable truths about the enslaved people who lived and worked at the Belle Meade Plantation. Recently, Bridget says she received information that the new leadership at Belle Meade is changing her tour, allegedly in hopes of making it more comfortable for white visitors. I'm so grateful to have the chance to sit down with Bridget to discuss these allegations and why her work preserving the truth is so important. We're also joined by Victoria Sample, the Director of Historic Interpretation and Education at Belle Meade, who will give us their side of the story. And hey, stick around for our special segment, A Mile in Their Boots. We'll be going inside a day in the life of Kathy Strahan, who's a traveling children's librarian for the Nashville Public Library. Thanks to Tecovas, our Western wear faves, for sponsoring this segment and for being our exclusive launch sponsor. It's Wednesday, October 9th. I'm Marisa Zill Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. I'm curious, what kind of tours were being offered at the Belle Meade Plantation when you first began working there in 2015? And how did they approach the history of slavery at that time?
So initially, there was just technically one tour, and we refer to it as the house tour. And that tour is going to cover the Harding-Jackson family primarily. You essentially would start in roughly 1807, and that tour is going to wrap, depending on the guide, anywhere between 1906 and the 1940s with William Harding Jackson, I believe the second or the third. He was around in the 40s. And you had an hour to do that. And we called it the Belle Meade Bible, which is a book written by Ridley Wills II. And that book kind of chronicles the history of Belle Meade on a very broad scale. So you take that book, synthesize that in a way that you can digest it and give it back to the public. How you cover slavery is based on the interpreter. It was at that point based on your comfort level with the topic more than anything at that point in time. So we have key people that we would cover. Of course, Susanna Carter and Bob Greene were kind of like the focus point. So as long as you hit them, you've done your due diligence. Anything other than that is kind of your own added touch.
And did they make you wear a uniform or some sort of costume in 2015?
I did. We dressed in what was technically 1880s attire because Belle Meade interprets the antebellum and the Reconstruction period. And so the superiors chose to have us dress in 1880s attire. So pantaloons, a chemise, stockings, boots, a corset, bustle, overcoat, and skirt. I have tattoos on my hands. I had to wear gloves to cover those. I'm obviously Black, so I wear a lot of braids. So those had to kind of be up in a bun. So it's as historically accurate to the period as possible.
And how did that tour make you feel during that time?
Well, I was very eager to be in this field. I knew that historical interpretation was something that I could be good at. My degree is in history with a specific focus in Africana studies. So I knew that this was a way in. I won't say happily, but I put on that outfit every day and I did my job. But the tour itself honestly showed me that I could approach history and historical interpretation in a way that was invigorating to an audience, but also truthful to my own personal experience and perspective. So there was a lot of comedic value to my tour because I am giving an hour tour essentially about the history of a rich white slaveholding family. So I have to find a way to make that comfortable for me. Because I did get dinged on that on reviews every now and then. But I think that there was some learning on behalf of everybody because can you expect me as a Black historian to give reverence to a slave-owning white family? I can give a honest interpretation of the facts, but I'm not going to sit here and lie like they didn't do what they did.
And then you got a promotion.
I did.
In 2018, you became the Director of African American Studies there, where you reshaped programming and developed the Journey to Jubilee tour, which I read focused on the history of enslavement through emancipation and contracted labor, not only at Belle Meade, but across plantations in the state. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that was a big promotion. Were you really excited about that?
I was extremely excited. So I left Belle Meade after I had my son in 2016 and went back to grad school because I thought I wanted to be a teacher. God quickly told me that was not my ministry. And I went back to Belle Meade because interpretation for the public space, it was good for me. It was easy for me. And it felt just like breathing almost. It was really natural. So yeah, I went back. We fostered that tour alongside my then colleague, Stephen Thomas, who was kind of already working on the project at the time that I had gotten back. We were able to put our heads together, and that tour came out very differently for both of us. At first, it was just us two. I think the emotional setup of it all is kind of what launched it into what it became.
So I grew up here in Nashville. I remember going to the Belle Meade Plantation for tours. I remember going to the Hermitage for tours. And specifically remembering at the Hermitage, the phrasing was that enslaved people lived in harmony with their owners, which was very upsetting. And I had so many questions too for my teachers that I remember. But to be very clear, these places were plantations where people were enslaved. And yet in 2018, the Belle Meade Plantation changed their name to be the Belle Meade Historic Site and Winery. Could you please just tell us the context around that? What kind of conversations were being had? Were you one to push back on that, or were you for it? I'm just curious what was happening during that time as they changed the name.
Yeah, no, I was not for it. I didn't make that fairly known. What the inner conversations around the name change were essentially to go alongside the fact that Belle Meade, as a thoroughbred stud farm, never fully referred to themselves as a plantation. They referred to themselves as the Belle Meade Stud Farm. And that stud farm happened to hold an enslaved population. Of course, there's also politics in that. There's some respectability politics, if nothing more, regarding that name change, I believe. And I think it was marketing. The plantation tourism industry, heritage tourism, gets really, really popular in the late 70s throughout the 1990s. And as plantations become a destination for people to kind of have this gone with the wind feel, this kind of whimsical, when America was great, idealistic view, I think plantations as a gimmick became really popular. And by the time that 2018 is rolling around, we now have Black Lives Matter. The conversation around having plantations as wedding venues is really popular. The Confederate flag has become extremely hot as a topic. And I think Belle Meade was doing its due diligence for a great PR spin. So it's a way for us to really get in front of the topic, stay neutral on the topic, and still address the topic all at the same time.
The same year they changed the name, you launched the Journey to Jubilee tour. Could you just tell us a little bit about this tour, maybe some of the stories that you shared or anything that you think that our listeners should really know?
Absolutely. I approached Journey to Jubilee from a very personal perspective. The one thing I will say is that there are not enough African Americans who do this type of work, specifically on ground zero plantations. And there are not enough African Americans who have power at these plantations to make vital changes. So I knew that I had one really great shot to tell this story in a way that it hadn't been told before, especially in the state of Tennessee. So I made sure that that tour was not only authentic to Belle Meade, but authentic to the African-American experience as a whole, as a Southerner. My family are descendants of the Ames Plantation in Grand Junction, Tennessee. So this is not a story that I did not grow up hearing. I know about slavery in the state of Tennessee even before my academic studies. So it became something that was emotionally challenging, emotionally triggering for some, but it was designed to be that way because until we feel how real the institution of slavery was, until we feel how horrendous the institution of slavery was, we won't completely understand it. And I wanted people to really leave with that understanding. I want you to feel for these people. I want to affect the ethos that's within each and every one of us. I don't care how racist you may be. You have feeling. And I really wanted to be able to pull that out of people. So I leaned into that. Some of the stories that I would tell, Belle Meade's total population of enslaved people was 136 by 1860. 11% of that number is listed as mulatto on the 1860 census. So while we may not know directly who those mulatto enslaved people derived from, we all know the mulatto people don't fall out the sky. And I'm not going to shy away from that topic. So I'd ask probing questions like, how did Master's wife feel? to have to live and work alongside or see her husband's mistress? How does the enslaved mistress deal with the wife who then has this pent up anger and aggression towards her that she can't control, nor did she ask for? How are the children affected in a situation of such, knowing that their father technically owns them? And while you may share his blood, you're not his blood. What if this enslaved woman has a husband? How then does it feel to be a man and knowing that your wife is being raped, but you have to work 6 days a week from sun up to sundown and come home to an 8x10 shack and sleep next to your wife? These types of issues become psychological and emotional over time. How then do we deal with the weight of that? And I think that tour touched hearts. It touched minds. And it's launched a career for myself that I couldn't have imagined. And that's how I know it's powerful.
And so what were the responses from visitors?
Typically tears. Tears and a lot of understanding, a lot of patience, a lot of reverence for the resiliency of a people that had no other choice. Of course, you're going to have people who are stuck in their time period who may not agree with my approach or think that it's too triggering or too trauma-filled, as was later said. But I think that for the most part, from what I can see and what I could feel in those rooms, giving that tour 3 times a day, 5 days a week, people left feeling something that they'd never felt before.
Did you encounter any resistance from the people you were working with at Belle Meade?
Not initially. Initially, everyone was extremely supportive, and those who weren't supportive just didn't say anything at all. The tour was making pretty good money. The PR was obviously really great. So, everybody kind of rode the wave for a little while.
Okay. And then cut to 2024.
Yeah.
You've been extremely vocal online about the fact that they are now changing your tour. You tweeted out, "I just found out that Belle Meade is rewriting my award-winning Journey to Jubilee tour because it's trauma dumping and too discussion-based. It's wild because the tour is about slavery. I knew when that racist lady took over, it was going to be some BS." All right. I love a spicy tweet.
I still stand on that.
Okay. So what is your understanding of what the tour is looking like right now?
From my understanding, the tour is being, as was relayed to me, standardized. No one has been able to give the tour in the fashion that I was giving it in my time there. They received new information, or there were some questions about old information, which is completely normal in historical interpretation. As new information arises, you shift and edit your tour to be historically accurate. Totally understand that. My issue is we're taking out things like examinations of the lost cause. And for listeners who don't exactly know what the lost cause is, it paints the South in a light that, maybe the Civil War was about a little bit more than slavery, which we know it was historically, but the root of the issue was enslavement. We're not going to debate that back and forth. They're taking away things like that. It was sent to me, the new tour sketch. There was no 11%. There is no discussion of the mulatto. Different is that we're not just talking about slavery for slavery's sake at Belle Meade. We're talking about a system, and we're talking about the systemic issues that arrived as a result within American society, from enslavement in 1860 and the civil rights movement of 1965 and police brutality of 2018. All of these parts that really are hitting people and making them look at American history for what it is, all of that's gone. All of the things that really made that tour, gave it depth, gave it something that was different than other plantations and set Belle Meade apart, making it the benchmark site that it was, all of that's gone. And then now it's just another generic, bland, whitewash tour on slavery. Has
Belle Meade reached out to you at all?
Nah. No, I highly doubt that I will, because I have very specific asks of the institution moving forward.
All right, admit it. It's time to replace your not-so-trusty old boots. You know the best place to shop for quality, handcrafted men's and women's boots is at your local Tacova store, at the Mall at Green Hills, or on Broadway by the Ryman. That's right, you now have 2 locations to choose from, so stop by and grab a cold one as you peruse. Tacova's Nashville is at your service. It's always a challenge to find boots that fit well and can survive a night walking around town, but you can find your perfectly fitted dream boots with the help of Tacova's expert staff. Your new Western boots can elevate a casual look or add a refined flair to any outfit. Everyone will be asking where you got your sick boots, but I won't be asking because I know they must be Tecovas. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all.
Welcome back. So we wanted to give Belle Meade the opportunity to respond to the allegations made by Bridget Jones and other former employees, claiming that they're updating the Journey to Jubilee tour to make it easier for visitors to digest. So I'm here with Victoria Sample, the Director of Historic Interpretation and Education at the Belle Meade Historic Site and Winery, to get her take on these allegations.
Hi, thank you for having me.
In your statement to News Channel 5, you mentioned the new Battle of Belle Meade tour. What will that be?
So I came on in May, just to give you a little bit of background. Part of my job as the Director of Historic Interpretation and Education is to evaluate all of our tours on site. While some updates have been made to some of our tours already, like our family tours, all of our tour updating is a collaborative effort. It's not just myself who does that. The tour that you mentioned, the Battle of Belle Meade tour, talks about the Civil War, how those who were enslaved here, how the Harding Jacksons lived through the Civil War. It talks about the Battle of Nashville. So it's a pretty all-encompassing tour, and you don't necessarily have to be a Civil War historian or understand the ins and outs of the Civil War to enjoy that tour.
So have you been updating the Journey to Jubilee tour?
Yeah, so to give a little context on that, so we have had one collaborative planning meeting with our assistant directors, our curation, and our collections team. And at this time, the tour has not changed. So we've had our one planning meeting. So just to reiterate, the tour has not changed. We've only had our one planning meeting. And in that meeting, we identified some stories of those who were enslaved here that just have not been shared with the public, and potentially a new oral history that we hope to include in order to honor their legacies. So if you came today, nothing has changed.
Can you tell me what the plans are for fostering board parity between the enslaved descendant community or local Black community and local white leadership?
So I can't speak to what is going on with the board because that is out of my purview, but I will say that we are in contact with our descendant families. We just had a descendant family reach out to us to share a new oral history. So we do have very constant contact with the descendants as far as in my realm of expertise here.
How does Belle Meade choose to handle current allegations of racism and nepotism in leadership and board positions that seem to be affecting the overall running of the site?
So again, that is out of my purview. I'm sorry. All I can speak to is the tour because that's what I have a hand in. And I think as I reiterated, it's a collaborative effort. So it's not just myself writing this tour. It's our assistant directors with our collections and your curation team, as well as some of the interpreters who give the tour now. So unfortunately, I cannot speak to those broader allegations, and I was not here during any of that time either. So I unfortunately don't have any of that knowledge either.
Okay, well, since you do mainly focus on the tours, do you ever consider the comfort level of white visitors when rewriting these tours that you've mentioned that have been there for quite some time?
No. So I can give you a good example. So our family tour that we recently updated, and this was made across all of our family tours, we have our source material here. So this is talking about Susanna Carter, who was formerly enslaved here. And this is the oral history from her descendant, Dr. Emma W. Bragg. And so when we were looking at updating our family tours, we discovered that we had just been misquoting this oral history. So we went back to the source material and realized, oh, we thought it said this. It actually said that, and we went and we just updated it across the board for our family tours. So that's kind of the sort of updating that we're doing. It's not changing core content. It's just going back to our source material and saying, okay, is this, a game of telephone that's been passed down and we've been telling the story wrong, and just really going back and looking at our sources and making sure that they still have the same context and meaning today.
Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know?
So I would just invite people to come on out and take a tour and see for themselves. I think we really pride ourselves, all of our interpreters, our current staff here, we really pride ourselves on what we do, the content on our tours, and we think they do speak for themselves. So we just invite people to come on out and take them, and they can see what's going on here from a firsthand perspective.
Do you have anything you'd like to say directly to Bridget Jones?
No, I don't know. I'm not from here and I'm new to the position. So I don't really have any content or commentary on that.
All right, Bridget. So I just played for you Belle Meade's response to your allegations. Now I would like to know your response.
So for one, I think that the explanation for the Battle of Belle Meade tour is a bit misleading. The Battle of Belle Meade tour alludes to it being a tour that's centered around a battle happening at Belle Meade, which of course we know did not happen. At best, it was a skirmish, and that's debatable. So framing a tour title around the idea that there was at one point some sort of Civil War battle on the grounds that was Belle Meade is a bit of a catchphrase or call out to those who seek out this type of information, who want to be a Civil War historian. Nothing wrong with Civil War historians. They are valid in their opinions and their historical scopes and focuses. However, it's the people who claim to be historians that aren't actually doing nuanced work that I struggle with. So what I would hate to see happen is for Belle Meade to get a ton of alt-right visitors on site thinking that they're going to get this Battle of Belle Meade tour that does not exist, because that history does not exist.
And especially with the neo-Nazis that have been showing up downtown Nashville.
Yeah. And I mean, think about the history of the city of Nashville and the legacy of people like Andrew Jackson and how emboldened he was. I mean, even William Giles Harding, from my understanding, believed that he was not going to cut his beard until the Civil War ended in his favor. Of course, we know the Civil War does not end in Southern favor, so he's never able to cut his beard by his own standing. I would love to see how Belle Meade chooses to handle the influx of neo-Nazis onto its property as a result of the current political stance of various historical institutions and, honestly, the politicians of Tennessee.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say to Belle Meade?
I'm interested in the lack of understanding of board parity. So if you, and this is nothing against Victoria as an individual, because I understand that she walked into this hornet's nest somewhat blind to a certain extent. However, from my research, she's not new to this career field. She understands the reputation that historical interpreters have, that historians have, and that leaders in the historical community have. To come in and essentially say that you kind of don't know what's going on in this field is kind of a cop-out. It's to save face. And I completely understand. The current leadership at Belle Meade is extremely retaliatory. So I wouldn't want to say anything that was out of the norm either, because I want to keep my job. And I get that wholeheartedly. So no issue with her. However, I do know that she's worked with the Memorial House, and his work with anti-slavery movements, with the abolitionist movement, with the Memorial Act, with understanding the importance of pushing Black people, the freed descendants of enslaved people forward, is extremely important. So she understands the role of the descendant community. You come from this legacy. You come from this field. So if you're going to enter this field in Belle Meade in the South, in the dominant South, then you have to come in and stand on what you believe, depending on what you believe. So in regard to Belle Meade, I think it's extremely important that Belle Meade has leadership that is abolitionist at its foundation, that is rooted in equality, that is rooted in understanding that Black people have been through a tremendous plight in the state of Tennessee and in America as a whole. And understanding that you have to be able to tell these stories honestly. You can't sugarcoat it. You can't mission statement your way out of it. There is no PR spin here. There is only the truth. And if you're not willing to address the truth, then we have a bigger problem here. And I've reached out to my colleagues across the board, essentially, who have been through similar issues to say, hey, am I tripping? Or is this an issue? And people understand that this is an issue. We need board parity. There needs to be 50-50 representation on that board. There does not only need to be rich white people on that board. Because when you only have that demographic on the board, then that reflects onto the leadership of the site itself, and a fish rots from the head down.
So I'm guessing you're not assured by her statement of saying that the Jubilee tour hasn't been changed as of today?
No, because my text messages still say what they said.
Yeah. So how can historic sites balance education, sensitivity, and truth-telling, especially when dealing with these painful aspects in history?
You just got to do it. You have to tell the truth. I don't think there's no
sugarcoating.
There's not a safe way. Nope. There's no safe way to do it. You just kind of do it. And I think that one of the best ways to do it is to involve the community, involve the descendant community. I believe that for every plantation board, there should be board parity. There needs to be 50-50, descendant community, rich white visitor. If you look at the demographics of Belle Meade's board, there may be 2 Black people on the board these days. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, I'm pretty sure, retired. And, before I left, I was told that one of the Black people that they were looking to bring onto the board, they were only looking to bring her on because she was a Black Republican and shared similar views to the new CEO. So I think that until we realize that these spaces are extremely important to our understanding of race relations in America, we're never going to really get that truth that we're looking for.
So you mentioned, obviously, descendants from the property from Belle Meade. Do any of these institutions actually offer any other resources for descendants? No. Is that the response there?
It's funny because I have gotten that question a lot from descendants who want to bring their children to plantation museums and educate their children on slavery. And, educating your little Black child is very different on educating your white child on enslavement. There's a much more personal connection to that story. There's some shame there, unfortunately. So you have to be very careful with how you relay that topic to your child. I have an 8-year-old who was essentially raised on Belle Meade's property. And, addressing it with him was always something that I took very, very much pride in because I knew that I could do it accurately. I think Montpelier does something because they do have that board parity where there's 50% descendant population on the board alongside 50% white descendancy on the board. So I think they're doing some good work there, but I can't say that across the board.
Thank you for that. And finally, as you know, Nashville is a huge tourist destination. I would love our listeners to know, what are some alternatives for visitors who want to learn more about Black history here in Nashville?
Oh, wow. Some amazing places. Of course, there's the National Museum of African American Music, and you'll even see some stuff about Belle Meade in that museum, especially regarding the Fish Jubilee singers. A descendant from Belle Meade goes on to become one of the original Jubilee singers. So that's an amazing little tidbit there. You can go to the Carl Van Vechen Art Gallery on the campus of Fisk University. They have an amazing art exhibit there. I'd say check out any of the campuses of any HBCU campus because they do have individual tours, especially with TSU, where they can tell you more about the Freedom Ride. So definitely getting some more civil rights history there. The Tennessee State Museum has some really interesting pieces in its collection relating to Black and African American history regarding slavery and just throughout time. Mr. Lorenzo on Jefferson Street has the Jefferson Street Sound Museum. I don't know how I could leave him out, but if you want to know more about Black music history on Nashville, I definitely say stop by there as well.
Is there anything else you think our listeners should know about this as the story continues to develop?
Yeah. I'd say, if anything, demand transparency. I think that museums serve communities, not the other way around. And if you feel like your local museum is not doing a good enough job at telling your story, their story, our story, whoever's story, as America gets ready to turn 250 years old, now is the time to begin demanding that they be more partial to everyone's history. Because at this point in our existence, what are we hiding from?
Well, again, thank you so much. I think it's so important to have this conversation.
Yeah, that's the point of this, is to continue to have the conversation, to start the conversation, and we'll see where it goes from there. This is just the beginning. This is nowhere near the end.
Another huge thanks to Bridget Jones and Victoria Sample. And hey, don't go anywhere. In just a sec, executive producer Whitney Pastrick is going to be walking a mile in the boots of Kathy Strahan, who works with the Nashville Public Library. Sponsored by Tecovas.
Hey y'all, it's CityCast Nashville executive producer Whitney Pastrick, and I'm here with Kathy Strahan, who is a traveling children's librarian with the Nashville Public Library. Kathy, can you tell me what a traveling children's librarian does?
Everything. I go to 4 small branches, Luby in Metro Center, Edge Hill, East, and Pruitt. I'm at a different branch every day. And then Fridays, I have kind of a work day. I travel to community sites and read with children. I play with puppets. I sing songs. I go to daycares and preschools and Head Starts and elementary schools. And then I do in-house programming as well. So in the library, I'll do story times or after school programming.
And we learned about you because our newsletter editor, Margaret Kingsbury, who's our token parent, is a huge fan of yours and your work. Tell us about how you got into this line of work.
Thanks to your awesome editor. She was a Richland Park patron as well. And I followed her on Instagram because she did amazing book reviews for Children's Lit. How did I get into this? So I've been a children's librarian for about 12 years. And when this position was posted, I was immediately drawn to it because my favorite part of being a librarian is going out in the community and doing programming.
All right, so let's walk a mile in your boots. Tell us what you do in an average day. You wake up and it's time to go somewhere. Where are you going? What are you doing there?
Okay, so I begin my day. I'll give you today as an example at a community site. So I got up and went to a daycare in North Nashville, and I went room to room, starting with infants who are, I actually had an 8-week-old today. So 8 weeks to 1 year. And I read with the babies. I go to the toddlers. I go to the preschoolers, just take it on the road, right? 30 minutes with each group, about 5 to 10 minutes with the infants. Their attention span is not that great. I read, I sing, I play with puppets, and then I'll have about 30 minutes to get to the branch, which today I'm at Luby, and I'll have 30 minutes to prepare for story time. I have about 10 minutes to drive to the branch and about 15 minutes to get set up before I greet families who come in. After story time, I'll usually work the desk for about an hour so that the staff can go for lunches. Most of these branches only have 4 staff members. And so it's really difficult during lunch period when people are in and out of the branch to have enough staff to cover the desk. So I'll work the desk for staff to go to lunch. I'll do my own lunch for an hour. And then I'll usually go back out to another daycare or preschool, do the whole thing over again, come back maybe about 4:30 or so, check my email, maybe do an after school program, and that's it. It's the end of the day.
So what is the hot book that's trending with infants and toddlers right now?
I'm going to tell you what I'm reading this month to infants and toddlers, which is Yummy Yucky. And it's by Leslie Petrocelli. And basically it goes through and says, apple pie is yummy. Boogers are yucky. Yuck. Yuck.
Oh my God.
And the kids really like it. Just any kind of books with expressions, I think, for those teeny tiny ones.
And if folks at home are looking for great book recommendations for their kids, I'm assuming that's something the Nashville Public Library does very willingly.
Absolutely. We even have an Ask a Librarian feature on the website. And so you can say, hi, I have a 3rd grader who loves books. She's already read these series. What do you think she could read next? And we'll actually get back to you within 24 hours, usually with book recommendations. We can even put them on hold for you so that you can just go to your local branch and pick them up when they're ready.
Talk a little bit about why you think your work is important, not just that there's library buildings where Nashvillians can come to, but that you yourself are able to go out into the community?
So not every child's going to come to a library for story time, right? Parents work, kids are in daycare and preschools for lots of reasons, whether they have working parents or not. I love that I get to bring the library to the children. It's pretty evident that once you grow up and you've had great experiences with libraries, you're going to grow up into community members who support libraries and the missions that libraries have. I see about 1,000 kids a month just in their schools and preschools and daycares. And it's pretty rewarding for me, but I think it's really rewarding for the community because these are going to be kids who grow up to be adults who support libraries.
At the end of a long day of reading to kids all over this fine city, when it's time for you to relax or have fun, what are some places you like to go? CityCast is not just a show that's about news, but we also love to give people great recommendations.
I'm in the Hillsborough, Belmont area. So, we walk to Brown's a lot. Old school, and we go to the Belle Court. They're all in walking distance. 12 South is super close as well. And if I'm not doing that, I'm usually going somewhere for live music. We go to the Ryman sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. But we like live music a lot. And so, it's not surprising for us to go to 2 or 3 shows a week just because we're in Nashville.
Y'all, if you need anything from your library at all, you can go to library.nashville.org to basically learn literally anything in the world. And if it's not on the website, you can ask a librarian and they'll help you find it. We'll have that link for you in our show notes, so you'll be just a click away. Thank you so much for listening. And Kathy, thanks for all you do.
Thanks, Whitney. This was fun.
That's all for today on CityCast Nashville. If you'd like to listen to Bridget's original Journey to Jubilee tour, we put a link in our show notes, and I highly recommend you check that out. And if you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles!